Without further ado, let me welcome you all to this December 1st Aula Public Forum. We've decided to continue these maybe on an every other month basis and do a newsletter on the intervening months. So I hope many of you saw our newsletter. Okay, well, Olivia, I was trying to get to your bio, but I'm having trouble getting to that too. So without further delay, folks, pardon my inadequacies here. Without further delay, let me introduce our speaker tonight, Dr. Green, Olivia Green. Olivia, I remember that you have your Doctor of Law from Cal Berkeley and a master's in Master of Science in help me out there, please.
Water policy and management.
Yep, thank you. And you bring about 10 years worth of experience to the table. And right now you're employed with the Nature Conservancy. Many of you know of the TNC, a not-for-profit, well-known, I think, national or perhaps even international in scope, but certainly national in scope. So thank you, Olivia, for donating some of your evening tonight. And you're going to tell us about a survey that you and your team conducted, I believe in the Finger Lakes and Lake Ontario region, adding up to several hundred people, asking them how important in their lives is good water quality and associated questions like that. And I think you all will find the resulting poll very supportive and positive and a bit even surprising, at least for me. So, Olivia, I'm going to turn the screen over to you if you can grab it and bring us up.
Yeah, bear with me for a second. That was a very impressive memory, Dana.
Olivia, I just drained it. I mean, that was my entire memory.
That's pretty good. I don't go by Dr. Green. That's my husband. So.
Oh, well, I noticed that you have a juris.
JD.
So
yeah, JD, just the law degree from law school.
Yes, okay.
But I don't. So just a little background. Right after law school, I worked for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, for 3 years, and then after that was in Cincinnati, and then moved here. My husband, Dr. Hyatt Green, has a job at SUNY ESF, so that's what brought us here. I'm working out of my home in Syracuse, and I worked in Syracuse for about 5 years for a small nonprofit there, and I've been with the Nature Conservancy for 2 years now, and I've really always worked on interdisciplinary water management teams. I'm a policy and law kind of wonk, but work with ecologists, hydrologists, economists on all sorts of different projects, ranging from like international water conflict to what I'm doing now, working in a much more, setting of Owasco Lake. Like Dana said, Olivia Green, my title is the Finger Lakes Water Quality Specialist, and I've been with the Nature Conservancy for about 2 years now. I want to give you a little bit of background on who we are, the Nature Conservancy, several of the projects we have going in Owasco Lake, and then, as Dana mentioned, really get into some of these really exciting findings that we did from some public opinion research we conducted.
Olivia, let me ask, do you mind if we all interrupt you as you're proceeding, or should we hold our questions until the end of your presentation?
I think I'd rather you hold questions. If something's not making sense at all, like interrupt me. I want things to be clear. But if it's just like a general question, hold it to the end, because who knows, I might address it later on in the presentation.
Good. Thank you very much.
Okay, let me figure out how to advance. Okay, so the Nature Conservancy, our mission is to conserve the lands and waters on which all life depends, and we do that through 4 priority areas. We're working to tackle climate change, protecting land and water, provide food and water sustainably, and building healthy cities. We've been around for a while. We just celebrated our 65th birthday. We started here in New York. We have really deep roots in New York, but over those 65 years, we have branched out to a global organization. We work on big global issues like tackling climate change, had a big presence at the recent climate summit. But really so much of environmental work is local, right? So we had before the pandemic, we had an office in downtown Auburn. That's where I used to work out of. And most of our work on the ground in the Finger Lakes is in the Owasco Lake watershed. So kind of a global perspective, but so much of the work really is local, and it's about the getting boots on the ground and those local relationships. Just a history of some of the work we've done in the Finger Lakes in the past. We were a partner in protecting the entire watersheds of Hemlock and Canadice Lakes, the drinking water source for the city of Rochester. We love connecting people with nature. People, protect what they understand, and getting people outside. It's good for you, and it's good for nature too. This is one example of Rob's Trail that actually connects Hemlock and Canadice Lake.
About your view is that the Fed is not.
We have preserves all over the state, several in the Finger Lakes region. You can mind if I'm.
Hey, everyone in participating, please mute your mic. Please mute your mic.
Here we go. Okay. We've also done some larger scale restoration projects at Honeoye and Canandaigua inlets, doing some floodplain restoration there, restoring a much more natural flow path. And this is a picture of Honeoye's inlet. And recently concluded a restoration project in partnership with the Skaneateles Lake Association on Dowling Creek as it runs through the Skaneateles Country Club. This is a restoration of a tributary, slowing the water down, letting some of the sediment filter out before it gets into Skaneateles Lake. And really, in all of this work, we've always been a partner with people, right? We rarely ever can do anything on our own. And that's where the magic happens, right? We all bring our different skill sets, our experiences, expertise, and work collaboratively. And that's really the lens through which we're looking at all of our work in the Finger Lakes right now, is how to foster more of that, fostering more collaborative governance. And we're doing that through several different projects. The first one I'll talk a little bit about is a science-based watershed approach to land protection or purchasing land. We're working to remove barriers to soil health implementation and some groundwork research for building more public support of the work. And that's what I'll get into in a lot more detail. So source water protection or land protection. We have a grant from New York State DEC to purchase high priority properties in the Owasco Lake watershed that are highly protective of Owasco Lake as a drinking water source. And the approach we're taking on this grant, several organizations in the region have grants like this. The city of Auburn has one. They purchased a property in the Flats. Finger Lakes Land Trust has several of these grants. We took a slightly different approach where we weren't picking out a property and saying, oh, we want to purchase this property and writing a grant proposal to purchase that one property. Instead, we said, let us take a science-based approach. We built a model for analyzing what sort of properties or what sort of parameters a property might have or characteristics a property might have that make it really protective of drinking water. So does it have wetlands? Does it have a stream running through it? Does it have highly erodible soils? Is it really steep slopes? Is it neighboring a property that's kind of a problematic property, and then the runoff from that problematic property is going on to this downslope property, and the problems are getting filtered out, and it's providing a function that way. So we built this model. We call it our strategy assessment model, our strategy assessment tool, and we ran every single property in the watershed through it. So that's 3,000 properties, and we ranked them. And as you'll see from this map, this is some of the results, just the top 50. And this map's a little misleading just because the green is so dominant, and green is land that's already protected. So you see Summerhill State Forest and Fillmore Glen State Park and public properties in the flats there and green, but really focus on the more yellow to red properties. And what you'll see is this clustering really at the southern end of the watershed, and a lot like far, far south in the watershed. And what you see is this importance of protecting headwater streams, right? When you might think when you're talking about source water protection or buying property that's going to keep a lake protected and clean, you think about shoreline properties, right? And those didn't pop so much in our model, in part because those properties tend to be smaller and much bigger properties the farther away you get from the lake. But also there's the key importance of protecting our headwater streams. There's a lot of development pressure on headwater streams because they're not protected, especially ephemeral streams. Smaller wetlands don't really have much protection, if at all. So the status of this project, we've closed on 3 properties. One was a gift. We have a property in the flats that was gifted to us. We've purchased through grant funds 2 properties. One is adjacent to Fillmore Glen State Park, and we're in the process of gifting that property to the park. So the park's about to get a little bit bigger, about 160 acres, I think, bigger, in sometime, hopefully early next year. So that's pretty exciting. And that happened to be our #1 ranked property in the whole watershed, right? Because we just started cold calling people and saying, are you interested in selling? Would you ever think about selling your property to protect it in perpetuity? And the #1 property said yes. And we're going to get gifted to the park. So that's a great story, great outcome for everyone. And we just closed on our 2nd property. It's along Fillmore Road, which we're working with the Owasco Lake Watershed Management Council for them to be the long-term steward of that property, to give them a property to own, learn about stewardship, and possibly to engage in their own stewardship activities, have a property to do restoration projects on, bring kids out for education, things like that. As part of that, building their capacity to be land stewards. And we really want to start, sharing the science of the importance of protecting these headwater streams. So that's that project in a really brief nutshell. Next up is soil health. It's the project we call our Owasco. And I see Bryson, who's with our partner, our close partner there, Evidin. That's really the ones on the ground doing this work. And this is also a really close partnership with Cayuga and Tompkins County Soil and Water Conservation Districts. And what the aim here is, the conservation districts play this really crucial role of connecting kind of the water quality sector and the ag sector, right? They're like firmly embedded in both of them and are great connectors in a bridge. And because they provide a lot of technical and financial assistance, or they can, they're the pathway in order to get financial assistance to implementing things like cover crops and reducing tillage and other soil health practices. But there's this very human, we all have it, resistance to change, right? Change can be scary. This loss aversion, we don't, that's a barrier. And we're trying to, with this project, really address that and bring down that barrier, and by working in behavior change. So there's kind of 2 tiers to this, or maybe peers to this, this work. First is working directly with the farmers. We've established a farmer panel of 8 farmers, and we want them to become this network, this peer network, farmer peer network. They're distributed all over the watershed. They kind of run the gamut of what they're producing, different crops, different scales, and where they are on their soil health spectrum or journey. Some have been doing it for a long time. Some of them are recently new to it, and they're doing different practices. That way, when a farmer is starting to consider doing something new, they have a trusted farmer peer to go to, somebody who's tried it and has had failures and can talk them through why things work sometimes and don't work, set reasonable expectations, help them through that process of, because it can be kind of a complicated process of getting all the grants and things like that. And somebody can help them, yes, it may seem daunting, but you can do it. I did it. And this is how I totally can empathize and sympathize with you because I've been through it. One outcome is a series of case studies. The first one was published in the Citizen just about last month. It was here, that screenshot of Farmer Steve Cutterback was the first farmer panel member that was featured in a case study. And there'll be another one coming out fairly soon. Also hosting some farmer barn sessions, so people can be invited to come to the barns and learn more about soil health. And a lot, all the information is there presented by the Soil and Water Conservation Districts and their advisors there. The other part of it is working with community groups and the civic groups like AWLA and the Watershed Management Council on, how can we work better together? How can we, make it easier bridges between the two sectors, and really fostering a better understanding of what it takes to change, right? And change is for everybody. We can all do a little bit better by, working better together, understanding how hard it is and the challenges that a farmer faces when trying to, take on a new approach. But also, there's changes that, outside of the ag sector that can be made. Things like those lake-friendly living practices that AWLA is promoting throughout the watershed. Things like changing out a septic system for, making sure you're maintaining your septic system as you need, and also, considering switching from a conventional system into one that actually treats for nutrients, right? Even a properly functioning conventional system isn't going to be treating for nutrients. They don't do that by design. Last night was actually a workshop that was for the community. I think, Dana, you participated. I don't know if anybody else on the call was able to participate. It filled up really quickly. But there will be another opportunity to participate as long as there's enough interest. If we can get 6 people interested in doing it another time, we could host it again on December 14th at 3 to 5. Oh, Dana, do you want to speak to your experience last night?
I'd like to speak to 2 aspects of that, if I could, please.
Yeah,
First of all, I think there are at least 6 other just AWLA board members who wanted to participate in yesterday afternoon's training opportunity. And so I think we can pretty well support a second session, Olivia.
awesome.
And the other thing I would observe is last night's training session took exactly 2 hours. It was very informative. Listening and watching and to the presentations and some of the case studies, often I was saying to myself, well, gee, I knew that, but it was a good reminder, and it helped organize how to tackle not only simple problems, but more importantly, complex problems like we all are wrestling with respect to a Wasco Lake and protecting our water quality and so forth. So very worthwhile training opportunity, and I would encourage you all to grab this next one on the 14th, as Olivia's slide says. Thanks, Olivia.
Yeah, thank you, Dana. If you're interested in registering, you can contact Tanea. She's heading up registration, or you can also email me and I'll get you in contact with Tanea or Bryson too, who's on the line as well. Some of the overall theme is to provide local community groups with behavior science skills to drive positive, sustainable practice change in the Owasco watershed. That key outcomes are learning how behavioral science can help drive change outcomes in the watershed, understanding why change doesn't happen, and developing a toolkit of behavior science skills and strategies to drive change. And this stuff is applicable in every aspect of your life. I use it on my kids as much as I use it in work, right? Let's see. All right, now for that public opinion research. This is really exciting stuff. I'm so happy to share it with you. We conducted some interviews and surveys with about 800 voters in the Finger Lakes region. And we did this 2 summers ago, summer of 2020. We did, so there were 800 people total that we talked to. About 400 of them, we wanted, since so much of our work is in Owasco and Skaneateles, we had half of those respondents, people we talked to, come from Owasco and Skaneateles watersheds. You have to do it by, we get contacts through the voter polls or voter registration. And so the closest you can get to it is by zip code. So they don't perfectly follow watersheds, but as close as we could get using zip codes. So about half of the respondents came from our region here. We did not include big cities like Syracuse or Rochester. So why did we do this? we're kind of venturing into doing more work in the Finger Lakes, and we just wanted to get a baseline understanding of the public's perceptions and how much they support water quality. How important are lakes to people? What's the level of support for increasing support or having new programs for water quality? Just baseline. We weren't testing anything specific that we were going to propose or throw out there. We just wanted to get a baseline assessment. You see the margin of error is about 4%. And some of the results I'm going to show you are not going to add up to 100 just because of rounding. Okay, so question number 1. Do you consider yourself a resident of the Finger Lakes region? In case there was ever any question about this, the answer is yes. If you start talking about the Finger Lakes, everybody that lives around here is going to know you're talking to them. It's a really, really strong identity. And it's very, very valuable to people, that sense of kind of a more laid back atmosphere and work and lifestyle. The rural landscapes are super important to people. The lakes themselves, recreation, having 4 distinct seasons, all very important to the people of the Finger Lakes. And that's really, when talking to the public, if you can connect to that sense of identity, it's very, very strong. It's very powerful to get your message out there. So then we asked, how important are the lakes to your quality of life? And this was really surprising to me, just that 70% of the people that we talked to said that they are very or extremely important. 70%. I mean, that's pretty astronomical, especially when you consider we weren't just talking to people that live on the lake, right? You would expect people that live on the lake, oh, that's very important. I see it every day, multiple times a day, get out on it multiple times a week. Of course, it'd be important, but this is true of people that live far away from the lakes, people that don't see the lakes from their homes, or maybe not even see the lake every day or every other day. People that don't even visit the lakes that often still, so they're highly important to their quality of life. This is true. It's from a range of politics. It doesn't matter your politics, your age, your education, proximity to the lake. It's really high among every type of person we asked. Really astounding. This is higher than most, we do public opinion research all over the country. The firm that we worked with does it all over the country, and they've never seen anything so high. Then there's like, more than Long Islanders love their beaches, we love our lakes. Then we asked, sorry, some of the controls are just like covering up the words on my slide. I have to like remember what the text says. How concerned are you about the condition of the waters in the Finger Lakes? And this was also really, really high. People are very concerned. Almost 70% said they're very concerned or extremely concerned. And people are seeing that the lakes, or the water quality in lakes, is going down over time. People are really concerned about it. Okay, sorry. Then we asked about what are some of the threats that you perceive. Remember, these are perceptions. What are some threats that you perceive to water quality in the lakes? And now there's a lot of information on this slide. This is kind of the raw data here, and it can be a little bit confusing. So I'll kind of walk through it slowly. You'll see major and minor threat, runoff from farms and invasive species, both very, very high. Then industrial pollution. You'll see we weren't sure if it would matter how we asked the question. Should we say pesticides, fertilizers, or manure, or switch up the language? We were just kind of testing it out. We do split samples, and it didn't, in the end, didn't really make that much difference. So that's why you see kind of multiple responses, or multiple, the same question listed multiple ways. So next up was industrial pollution. Climate change was less so. Then pesticides and fertilizers from runoff on private lawns and gardens. Then golf courses. And then another way of asking, private lawns and gardens. We also asked about perceptions of farming. And this was overwhelmingly positive too. There was a really strong affinity toward farming and the rural agricultural landscape that's characteristic of the Finger Lakes region. People perceive farming in the region as really small scale, family-based. Many mentioned the Mennonite traditions, dairies, flowers, local wine, local beer, local produce, farm stands, farmers markets, co-ops, fresh local produce were some of the ways that local farms foster that really important sense of uniqueness and identity of Finger Lakes. Here are a couple of quotes we pulled from our focus groups. I've never heard of any big names promoted by the grocery stores. When they advertise local produce, it's small family farming. You know, think about going to the bakery section of Wegmans and seeing, you know, a larger than life poster of a wheat farmer from Canandaigua, you know, like that. I feel like that's what that person was thinking of. I picture hardworking people who just want to do something they love while being able to make a living. So this really strong affinity toward farms. Then we asked, in general, would you support or oppose increasing funding for programs that would help improve water quality and reduce algal blooms? This was really, really high level of support. Now that's different than concern, right? Concern doesn't always translate into support, right? I'm concerned about a lot of things all over the globe, you know, but there's only so many things I can support with my time or financially or volunteering or just even staying up to speed on with issues and reading about them. So that there's really high levels of support is really important because that indicates people are willing to do something, people are willing to take action. Then we asked, we were really curious, like what kind of support, what kind of policies would you support? And again, these are hypothetical. This is not something we're proposing on a ballot measure or anything like that anytime. Totally hypothetical. Just wanted to get a lay of the land, a baseline understanding of what people would support and what would be most popular with people. Conserving land and wetlands was really, really strong support. Improving maintenance of ditches and culverts along roads, just like Al is doing in partnership with Soil and Water. Super high support for that. And the public is, you may not hear or feel a lot of pats on the back, but people are really supportive of the exact work that Al is doing on ditches. Yeah, hope you feel that that's very affirming. Providing financial incentives to farmers to adopt lake-friendly practices, also really, really high. And connect that with that strong affinity toward farmers. Connecting more lakeside homes to local sewer systems was also high. The next slide is just a continuation of these results. I'm going to go ahead here. Other high policies were increasing funding for removing quagga and zebra mussels. The next one's a bit wonky. It's basically establishing some sort of pollution cap, a nutrient pollution cap that gets lower. The cap gets more and more restrictive over time. That was highly supported. And then providing financial incentives to replace cesspools and septic systems with modern on-site treatment systems. So those systems that can actually treat for nutrients, also very high, like that the program that the county runs now, where you can get a 50% up to $10,000 cost share for replacing your septic system. We're starting to work with the county on, well, what about bringing in some of those newer technologies that'll actually treat for nutrients and not just switching out conventional systems for conventional systems, failing systems for conventional systems. So it's an improvement for sure, but it'd be great if we could get some systems and get a demonstration or pilot in the ground for these types of systems that'll actually treat for nutrients. And if Al is interested in partnering,
you take your medicine at 7:30.
Next up, here's the next step of like, oh, you support it. So the types of things you might support, how much would you support it financially? We asked about your willingness to pay. And it's kind of regardless of how the money's raised. Like we asked later about what type mechanisms for raising revenue. That's kind of a mixed bag all over the place, but there's really strong support for people's willingness to pay, regardless of how the money is actually generated. So, first we asked $25, then $20, 15, and 10. It's really strong support. A lot of people are willing to pay $10 a month. $10 a month per family region wide. That could be a significant source of revenue. And I think it really shows that people don't just support something in theory, but they you put a dollar amount on how much they care, and that amount is pretty high. So with that, I'll just leave with a couple of conclusions, and I get two kind of main threads of conclusions that from this body of research. First is just how astronomical the results are and how positive it is. I hope you all as leaders in improving water in Owasco Lake feel that this is very affirming, that the public is so supportive and appreciative of what you're doing. That we could share this with our elected officials and say, the public is behind this. They are supportive. Like, let's be bold. Let's take some strong action on improving water quality, because the public support is there. That's not all you need, of course, to have a new funding program. Lots of things have to be lined up, but knowing that the public is supportive is a huge boost. And then the other interesting conclusion that I get out of this research is this really nuanced, interesting story about when it comes to agriculture, right? People love their lakes. They also love the agricultural landscape and farming and local produce that comes from living in the Finger Lakes. They also identify agricultural runoff as a significant threat to the lakes, and they want to support they want to support farmers to do more of the right thing, right? It's a really positive kind of framing of, we love farmers and we want to support them doing more of the right thing. I'll just leave with that. There's my email. You can check out the Nature Conservancy at nature.org, and I'll just open it up for questions.
Questions, any and all. I've been accumulating several, but I don't want to dominate the meeting here. So, questions for Olivia? Olivia, say a little more, if you would, please, about how these 800 people were, I guess, identified. Are they biased toward people who tend to be more proactive, progressive, and that's why they decided to participate in the survey? Or do you think do you have reason to think that it's a fair slice across the population? Can you talk more about that, please?
Sure, and I'm by no means an expert. This is the first time of me being involved in any type of research like this, but we did work with a very reputable firm that does polling all over the country, and they accessed people's phone numbers through the voter poll. So these are 800 voters, registered voters in the Finger Lakes. So it has an interesting caveat. People that second homeowners in the Finger Lakes may not be registered to vote in the Finger Lakes, so we wouldn't have captured them. But these are from the voter polls. So we would make the call, or we didn't make the call. The firm made the call. And there may be a bias in who would say, yes, I will talk to you about Finger Lakes, but there wasn't a bias in who we initially called. I think it's a pretty good slice of the population. That's a good question.
Okay, thank you.
Olivia, this is Ken Kudla. I have a question concerning, I guess you called it your hot list of properties that you were identifying for acquisition. The one you mentioned was at Fillmore Glen. Is there a list that you maintain that kind of targets areas throughout the watershed? And the one I'm most interested in is there's a very large, I guess it was an ex-swamp that they're trying to farm between Locke and Moravia on the west side of the road. And I'm just wondering, how do you determine what particular pieces of property you're targeting, and do you have a specific list?
Yeah, so the list we've generated is, we got it from property tax, the Cuyah County ImageMate, all their property records, and running a GIS through those characteristics that were important to us, or important to determined to be important for water quality. So things like a wetland slope, forest cover. And it's important, I don't think I mentioned this, that these are properties that are in great shape now, right? These are properties that aren't going to require any significant restoration to improve water quality. They're serving a great function now, and we want to protect that. So we got the list. We ran the all 3,000 properties through our model, our GIS model, and ranked them, right? So we've I think we have a list of maybe the top 100, because really, like when you're talking about 3,000 properties, and you know the top 100, like those are all great. You know, it's kind of splitting hairs. It's a great story that the #1 property was a property we were able to acquire. I just love that for the story of it. But you know, the difference between property #1 and property #21 is, you know, in the margins. So that's the list we're working from. We had sent letters to the property owners with them, the addresses that were associated with those properties and their property tax. And then, you know, some of them wrote back, some of them called us back, most of them did not. Some of them called us back a year later, you know, as you know, their circumstances changed or their interests changed.
So you don't ever publish a list for, you know, people like, you know, the OWLA board that might know some of these property owners personally, that perhaps we could help leverage them in some way.
Well, you know, we hadn't thought about that, but yeah, maybe we could talk about doing that. Right now we're aiming to close the grant kind of midway through next year, and there's 2 properties we're kind of considering and starting to negotiate with. We're waiting for the appraisals to come in and things like that, and we anticipate that will spend down our grant in its entirety. But you know, things can happen, deals can fall through, and we don't want to leave any of the grant money on the table. So there may be another round of outreach ahead of us, and we'd love, yeah, if you know some property owners that might be more willing to talk to you than us strangers that they've never heard of, that would be a great way to get introduced to it. And then I would like to, you know, share these results, like this tool is available, or make it available, and you see like where are these priorities properties, you know, as they become available.
Yeah, I know Dana's doing some work with the Woolly Elegid, and we've been talking to specific property owners, so perhaps this could just be an extension of that.
Yeah, and Dana, unfortunately, we don't have phone numbers. That's why I was looking into trying to share that with you, so you could help you on that, but we don't have phone numbers, because yeah, we just have the property tax information, and that's just mailing addresses.
Okay.
Yes. Hey, Peter Rogers, I noticed you unmuted yourself. Do you have a question or comment?
Yes, I do. Olivia, thank you very much for your presentation. Could you tell me a little bit about how you work with the Nature Conservancy or the Finger Lakes Land Trust, because your approaches seem to be very similar?
Yeah, we stay in touch, especially with these types of grants that we both have in the same watershed. You know, supporting one another, and both supporting the Watershed Management Council as becoming a future land steward in the region. We have a really good working relationship with the Land Trust. I am the one Nature Conservancy staff member in like all of Central New York. And we have a Rochester office, so we have some other people in the Western Finger Lakes. I have a couple of colleagues in Ithaca, but like we don't have the on-the-ground presence to be able to steward land like the Finger Lakes Land Trust does. You know, have like an intense focus on this region, and we just don't have that. Like, you know, it's me, and I'm not a land steward. I don't know what to do, how to properly post. And I'd have to be out there like all of the time. So we don't have the capacity. So, you know, really thankful for the Finger Lakes Land Trust and the Central New York Land Trust too, over in Onondaga County.
Excellent, thank you. Another question might be, for example, the property you bought next to Fillmore Glen, you transferred that over to the park system. Do you hold property yourself, or do you try to transfer it to another agency?
For this work, we are trying to transfer them, just because, like I said, we just don't have the capacity, the land steward, to, you know, we're members of the Land Trust Alliance, and so we follow, very strict guidelines on what it means to steward land. We have to be out there so often and being on the land, and we just don't have the capacity here for that. We do own land all over the state, though. We have some preserves, especially in the Western Finger Lakes. We have a stewardship team there. We have a lot of properties down in Long Island and some others like Westchester County, and lots of properties out in the Adirondacks. And Tug Hill, we have a huge preserve out in Tug Hill as well. And they all
Thank
have
you.
their own dedicated stewards, and sometimes we work with usually neighbors to be voluntary stewards. Like that's how it's working right now at the property adjacent to Fillmore Glens. We still own that one. We're in process of gifting it to the state. One of the neighbors is stewarding it for us in exchange for being able to hunt it this hunting season. So sometimes we work out things like that.
Thank you.
Other questions, anyone? If not, I'll ask another.
I have one, if that'd be all right. It's kind of an open-ended question. Olivia, this is Julie Lockhart, and I attended the training, behavioral change training yesterday, and I'm also part of our membership committee with AWLA. And
the meeting that I missed most of, but
hi, Keith. We're trying to drive up our membership. And one thing that we've encountered is there seems to be this idea that AWLA is lakeshore owners only. And we want all citizens of the watershed to work together, and our numbers matter when we try to apply for grants ourselves or assist as a community partner in a other kind of grant. Do you have any ideas, suggestions about how we could leverage some of that training and this wonderful survey result? Any practical tips that you might offer?
Yeah, a couple things come to mind, like just some key messages that we found are people are really receptive to, like really framing, like play to that, or mention that that strong identity. Maybe you could even be Owasco Lake specific, how important the lake is to everyone, not just the lakeshore, and that people, and not even just people that recreate on it frequently. It's important to everybody that lives around it. It's valuable. It's, you feel the value of it. Your neighbor feels the value, even if you're not, living on the lake. Other messages that people are really receptive to in response to, just talking about how people see that there's a problem now and they want to do something about it now. And talking about future generations, how this is a fantastic quality of life that we have, but we're really concerned with increasing blooms, that our kids and our grandkids are not going to have that same quality of life and same ability to enjoy the lakes. Speak to that like multi-generational, we want to do something about this now to protect the quality of life for future generations. That we found people really respond highly to those. And I think this collaborative, like we're all in this together. It is our Owasco. It's the lakeshore, it's the headwaters and everything in between. The aloes for you, and doing something about water quality is good for everybody because it's a drinking water source too.
One way I look at it is that we're not experts. We're volunteers. We're just regular people, and so that's kind of something I like to bring up. We're not the professionals. We're not running for office. We're just us. Shoot, I had another question. It just went out of my head. I'll have to come back, maybe, but thank you. Those are really great suggestions.
Keith Batman, I noticed you had unmuted for a bit. Did you have a comment or a question?
no, it was a mistake and I apologize.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
You're certainly welcome. Olivia, your last slide your slides are still up on the screen. Can you go back to the one, maybe 6 slides in, that talked about the farmer panel, behavioral change for farmers, involving farmers?
This one?
Yes, and so I want to ask, what's the motivation for farmers to participate in a panel like this? I mean, it's taking time and they have many other chores to do, so to speak. And so what's motivating these individuals?
That's a great question. I think one that we've learned from the behavior science is, and Bryson, jump in and correct me if I misstate anything, please. That celebrating people and giving people positive attention when they've done something, taken that risk and done something that's good for all of us. That's part of why we're celebrating these case studies and getting those out there, sharing those positive stories and showing, the farmers have sometimes been on the other end of the finger pointing, getting blamed, and they want to show that we do care about the lake. We consider ourselves great stewards of the land. It's very important to keep the soil quality high. We want to pass this on to our next generation. Same motivations for keeping the lake clean. It's keeping the farms in good shape and the soil in good shape. And they want to share that word out there because like farmer to farmer understand that, but it can sometimes not get out to the broader community. Bryson, do you have anything to add to that? Are you still on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that also something that we've seen again and again in interacting with a lot of the farmers in the Owasco Lake watershed is that, there's a want to do right by the land, by the watershed, by, the animals that are being raised. And I really think that it's something that a lot of the individuals in the farming community want to be able to portray, that they want people to know that, in a similar way to what to what we had just been talking about a few minutes ago of kind of Julie had mentioned that we have this situation of we're all just people, and these farmers have the same point of view. They're just individuals in a community, and they want to make sure that people do understand that we all have very similar goals, because we do. So yeah.
And so Bryson, are these a mix of crop farmers as well as animal raising, animal focused farmers?
Yeah, we worked with the soil and water conservation districts to try to put together a panel that was a good demonstration of different size farms in the area, different age farmers, different generations of farmers, along with different commodities. So to include livestock, to include, people that might have more diverse vegetable crops and things like that. And clearly some of the major target is the dairy industry. We need to be able to accept that. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Dana, I have one more question. Peter Rogers. Olivia,
Peter,
you mentioned.
Make this your last one, okay? I mean,
I promise.
Yeah, okay.
Olivia, you mentioned that your grant funding runs out probably middle of next year. Will you be applying for more? And is there any way we can help?
We haven't. I don't know that we'll be applying for more just because we've hit this, issue of the stewardship, long-term stewardship. But what I'd love is to increase the capacity locally for a group to be able to do it. Like maybe the Watershed Management Council could take it up, or even take the same approach, use the same strategy assessment tool that we did. Be happy to share it for those purposes. I'd love to share the tool with DEC when they're evaluating what properties to fund acquisition for too.
Excellent, thank you.
I guess one more question, if I may, focused on farms. We all like to think of farms in the, all is a strong term. Most of us like to think of farms in the traditional sense, the red barn and silo and cows in the pasture and so forth. And I'm not anti-CAFO at all, but we have in the watershed a large number of industrial farms. And did you, in any of your survey or maybe even farm panel, is there a difference in perception on the part of people relative to big industrial farms versus the traditional family farm?
Yeah, we didn't like dive that deeply into it, but I think like even the large farms in New York, just generally, are fairly small compared to like the big industrial operations that you see in the Midwest. Like there's still, I think it's still true that they're, family-based operations. There's large family-based operations with lots of employees, dozens of employees, but there's still like relatively small scale and run by a family. So I think that's true, but we didn't ask like, a difference in perception of different scale operations.
That's a good perspective, and I agree. I think you're right.
Bryson, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I think that we found as well that, scale is relative, definitely. And, just like with our watersheds, and we need to be able to consider the scale according to watershed type of stuff. So, I mean, you're completely right, Dana, that, some of the scale of some farms in the watershed may be large for our comparison, but in the bigger picture, they're not crazy large. Yeah.
Mickey Belosi just put a note in the chat box, and it just went off my screen here, but I think to the effect of the extension, the Cornell Cooperative Extension has details about farm size, and she points out that most dairy farms in Cayuga County have fewer than 100 head of cattle. Thank you for that input, Mickey. All right, well, I'm not trying to drag this forum out. So one more opportunity for anybody and everybody to ask questions. We have a unique opportunity here with Olivia as our speaker.
To explain what was used in the model to identify lands. Yeah, and I wish I had, we used GIS. I'm not the technical person that ran any of the modeling or designed any of the modeling, but we're looking at factors like mapped wetlands, mapped streams, erodibility. We did factor in, and I cannot define how we did this, sorry, kind of development pressure, and I can't remember how we, what our proxy for that was. Things like proximity to a source of runoff. Like I mentioned earlier, if an upslope property is a source of runoff, the downslope property might be filtering out through having wetlands or just an undeveloped forest. Might be filtering out some of that runoff as it flows onto that downslope property. So that would be a higher ranking function. I think the scale of the property, just the size, you're going to get more functionality out of a bigger property, of course. Yeah, tree cover was another one. What we found, like when I'm the one who ends up going out and ground truthing when we see a property and we start talking with the landowner and to make sure that yes, in fact, there is a stream on the property, and yes, in fact, there are wetlands on the property, and they haven't been, because we're just using aerial images, as the first kind of assessment. I'm going to ground truth, make sure those things are, the forest is still there, the wetlands are still there, there's no big, hasn't been any dumping or anything like that. What I'm finding as I do ground truthing is usually there's a lot more wetlands on the properties that are not mapped wetlands. Usually there's several more streams that are not mapped, and those things are things that are not protected at all. If they're not mapped, DEC doesn't know about them, they're not protected. Sometimes they're not protected anyway, but there's usually a lot more wetlands, especially than is mapped. So these properties are actually fulfilling or providing much more ecosystem services than our assessment would say from just from our aerial view and our desktop assessment. But I can share, I don't have it up with me, and it'll take me too long to find it, a slide that at least gives some of the parameters that we looked at in a little more layman's terms, but a little more technical than I'm able to say off the top of my head.
Could you tell us again, this is Julie, who you're going to be gifting that second parcel to for land stewardship? I didn't quite catch it.
Yeah, we're talking with the Owasco Lake Watershed Management Council.
Wonderful. I was hoping that's what I heard.
Yeah.
Good choice.
Yeah, so Adam and I walked it a few weeks ago now, and yeah, so it'll be a process, but we'll figure it out. And we want to, we're not in a rush, so we want to get it right. It'll be their first time owning property, and they got to figure that out and everything they need. So no rush, but yeah, that's who we're talking with.
Okay, well, our sincere thanks. Olivia, a wonderful presentation. Second time I've heard it. I want to listen to it several more times and look through the slides.
I'm giving it to Skinny Atlas Lake Association next week, so Dana, you can.
So I'll catch it there again. That's a good reminder. But thank you so much for the work you've done, the work you're doing, for your time even this evening. And with that, then we will sign off. Any remaining questions or comments, anyone?
Feel free to reach out in my email, olivia.green@tnc.org. Happy to answer questions if you think of them later. And thanks I really hope you all find this stuff really affirming. This is,
Yes, thank you. It's
yeah,
great.
Thank you.
inspirational, right? Feels good.
Yes.
Thank you, Olivia. It was great to hear.
Great. Yeah, happy to do it. Thanks for giving me the time.
Okay, good night now, everyone.